The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through the thin walls of apartment 2B at 5:30 a.m., but Sarah Thompson was already awake. She had been staring at the water-stained ceiling for the past hour, her mind racing through calculations that never seemed to add up right. Rent was due in 3 days. The electricity bill sat unopened on her kitchen counter like a ticking time bomb. And now Emma was coughing again, that deep, rattling sound that made Sarah's heart clench with worry. Sarah Michelle Thompson had never imagined her life would look like this at 24. Fresh out of college with a communications degree, she had dreamed of working in Nashville's music industry, maybe as a publicist for up-and-coming country artists. Instead, she found herself pregnant and abandoned by her college boyfriend, Jake Morrison, who decided fatherhood wasn't part of his 5-year plan. 3 years later, she was still picking up the pieces. The morning light filtering through her apartment's single window revealed the reality of her situation. The living room doubled as Emma's play area, toys scattered across a worn carpet that had seen better decades. The kitchen was barely large enough for 2 people, its appliances a mismatched collection of second-hand finds from garage sales and Facebook Marketplace. But it was home, and more importantly, it was theirs. "Mama?" Emma's small voice called from the bedroom they shared. At 3 years old, Emma Thompson had inherited her mother's determination and her father's bright blue eyes, though Sarah tried not to think about that particular detail too often. "I'm coming, sweetheart," Sarah called back, pulling herself from the lumpy couch that served as her bed. She couldn't afford a proper bedroom set, so Emma got the bedroom while Sarah made do with whatever furniture she could find. Emma was sitting up in bed, her blonde curls matted with sleep and her cheeks flushed with fever. The cough had gotten worse overnight, and Sarah could hear the wheeze in her daughter's breathing that made her stomach drop. "My chest hurts, Mama," Emma said, her voice small and scratchy. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her palm to Emma's forehead. The fever was definitely higher than it had been the night before. She had been hoping it was just a cold, something that would pass with rest and children's Tylenol. But looking at her daughter now, she knew they needed to see Dr. Patricia Williams at the clinic. "I know, baby girl. We're going to get you all better, okay?" Sarah forced a smile she didn't feel. "How about some breakfast? I'll make your favorite, cinnamon toast." As she prepared Emma's breakfast, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from her supervisor at Murphy's Diner, where she worked the lunch shift 3 days a week. "Can you cover Jennifer's shift today? She called in sick. 11/7, tips should be good. Predators game tonight." Sarah stared at the message. She needed the money desperately, but Emma was sick and needed to go to the doctor. She typed and deleted several responses before finally settling on, "Can't today. Emma's sick. Sorry." The response came immediately. "Third time this month, Sarah. We need reliable people." Sarah's heart sank. She couldn't afford to lose any of her jobs, but she also couldn't leave Emma with a fever and that cough. Being a single mother meant making impossible choices every single day. After Emma managed to eat a few bites of toast, Sarah helped her get dressed in warm clothes. The October morning in Nashville carried a chill that seemed to seep into their poorly insulated apartment. She bundled Emma in her pink jacket, a hand-me-down from Sarah's co-worker at her weekend babysitting job, and grabbed her own thin coat from the hook by the door. The walk to the community health clinic was only 6 blocks, but with Emma moving slowly and stopping frequently to cough, it took them twice as long as usual. Other parents hurried past them on the sidewalk, heading to drop their children off at daycare, before rushing to jobs that probably paid enough for them to afford reliable health care. Sarah tried not to feel bitter about it. The waiting room at Davidson County Community Health Center was already crowded when they arrived at 8:15 a.m. Sarah approached the reception desk, where Mrs. Linda Rodriguez, a kind woman in her 50s, greeted them with a sympathetic smile. "Morning, Sarah. How's our little Emma today?" "Not so good, Mrs. Rodriguez. She's had a fever all night, and this cough that won't quit." Linda typed something into her computer, her expression growing concerned. "I can get you in to see Dr. Williams, but I need to let you know, your account shows a balance of $180 from Emma's last visit." Sarah's cheeks burned with embarrassment. "I know. I've been trying to pay it down, but things have been tight. Can we maybe work out a payment plan? Of course, honey. Dr. Williams will still see Emma. We never turn away children. Linda's voice was gentle, but Sarah could see the worry in her eyes. She'd probably had this conversation with dozens of parents who were struggling to make ends meet. They waited for nearly 2 hours before Dr. Patricia Williams, a woman in her early 40s with graying hair and tired but kind eyes, called them into the examination room. Emma had grown increasingly listless during the wait, curling up in Sarah's lap and drifting in and out of sleep. Dr. Williams examined Emma thoroughly, listening to her chest with a stethoscope and checking her throat and ears. Her expression grew more serious as she completed her assessment. Sarah, Emma has developed bronchitis, and I'm concerned it might be heading toward pneumonia if we don't treat it aggressively. I'm going to prescribe an antibiotic and a bronchodilator to help with her breathing. Sarah nodded, trying to process the information while Emma whimpered on the examination table. What do I need to do? The antibiotic is crucial. She needs to take it for the full 10 days, even if she starts feeling better. The bronchodilator will help open her airways. I also want you to use a humidifier in her room if you have one, and bring her back if her fever doesn't break in the next 48 hours. Dr. Williams handed Sarah 2 prescriptions, her expression compassionate. Sarah, I know things are difficult for you right now. These medications are important, but they're also expensive. The antibiotic alone will probably run about $85, and the bronchodilator is around $65. $150. Sarah felt the number hit her like a physical blow. She had exactly $73 in her checking account and maybe $20 in cash at home. Her next paycheck from her Tuesday-Thursday house cleaning job wouldn't come until Friday, and even then, it would barely cover their groceries for the week. Is there a generic version? Or maybe something less expensive? Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. I've already prescribed the most cost-effective options, Dr. Williams said softly. But let me give you some information about the pharmaceutical assistance programs. Sometimes the manufacturers offer coupons or discounts for families in need. Sarah took the papers Dr. Williams handed her, knowing that even with assistance programs, she probably wouldn't qualify or the process would take weeks that Emma didn't have. She thanked the doctor and gathered Emma, who was now crying softly from exhaustion and feeling unwell. The pharmacy at the Kroger on Murfreesboro Pike was busy with the lunch rush when they arrived. Sarah had chosen this location because it was walking distance from their apartment, and she'd heard they sometimes offered payment plans for prescriptions. Emma sat in the shopping cart, her head resting against Sarah's arm as they waited in line. Thompson, the pharmacist, a young man named David Chen, called out after what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Sarah approached the counter with Emma still in the cart. Hi, those should be prescriptions for Emma Thompson. David pulled up her information on the computer. Okay, I have an antibiotic and an albuterol inhaler. The total comes to $147.63. The number hung in the air between them. Sarah opened her purse and counted the bills twice, hoping somehow she'd miscounted earlier. $43 in cash and her debit card that she knew would be declined if she tried to put more than $30 on it. Is there any way? Could I possibly pay part of it today and part next week? Sarah asked, her voice shaking slightly. David's expression was sympathetic, but firm. I'm sorry, ma'am. We can't release prescription medications on partial payment, but I can hold them for 48 hours if you need time to arrange payment. Emma started coughing again, a harsh sound that made other customers in line look over with concern. Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes as she realized she was going to have to leave without the medicines her daughter desperately needed. Could you just give me the antibiotic for now? That's the most important one, right? David checked his computer again. The antibiotic alone is $87.49. Still more than she had. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, trying to think of anyone she could call, anyone who might be able to help. Her parents lived in Oregon and were barely getting by on Social Security. Her sister Jessica Martinez was dealing with her own financial problems after her husband lost his job. Her friends from college had all moved on to careers and lives that didn't include emergency loans for struggling single mothers. "I need to make a phone call," Sarah said finally. "Can you hold both prescriptions until tomorrow morning?" "Of course. They'll be here when you're ready." Sarah pushed the cart toward the front of the store, her mind racing. She could try to pick up an extra babysitting job tonight, but that would mean leaving Emma with her neighbor, Mrs. Betty Johnson, who was kind but elderly and might not be able to handle a sick child. She could try to return some of the groceries she'd bought last week, but most of it was already gone. As they passed the grocery aisles, Sarah realized she still needed to get something for dinner. Her stomach was already cramping from stress and the single cup of coffee she'd had that morning. Emma needed something nutritious to help her fight the infection, even without the antibiotics. She grabbed a cart and headed toward the soup aisle, calculating carefully. A can of chicken noodle soup was $1.89. A loaf of bread was $2.49. Milk was $3.99. She could make it work if she was careful, and at least Emma would have something comforting to eat while they figured out how to afford her medicine. The store was busy with the late afternoon crowd, people stopping after work to grab ingredients for dinner, families doing their weekly shopping, elderly residents carefully comparing prices on fixed incomes. Sarah envied their normalcy, the casual way they placed items in their carts without doing mental math at every turn. In the produce section, she allowed herself one small indulgence, a bag of apples for $4.99. Emma loved apples, and the vitamin C might help her immune system. It would mean less money for other things, but seeing Emma's face light up when she saw the bright red fruit would be worth it. As she made her way through the store, Sarah found herself making the calculations she'd become expert at over the past 3 years. Rent was $675 due in 3 days. She had $73 in checking and maybe $20 at home. Her next house cleaning paycheck would be $180 on Friday. If she could pick up 2 extra babysitting jobs this weekend at $50 each, she could make rent with about $20 to spare. But that didn't account for Emma's medicine, or the overdue electricity bill, or the fact that Murphy's Diner might fire her for calling out today. The cough syrup aisle caught her attention, and she stopped to read the labels on over-the-counter medications. Nothing would be as effective as the prescription bronchodilator, but maybe something would help Emma sleep better tonight. The children's cough medicine was $8.99, expensive, but possibly worth it. By the time she reached the checkout line, Sarah had managed to keep her total under $25. It wasn't much: soup, bread, milk, apples, and the cough medicine. But it would get them through the next few days if she was creative with portions and meal planning. The checkout line was long, filled with people eager to get home to their families and evening routines. Sarah found herself behind a well-dressed woman who was buying what looked like ingredients for a dinner party: steaks, wine, fresh flowers. The woman was probably in her 60s with perfectly styled red hair and clothes that looked expensive but not flashy. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never had to count grocery money twice. Emma had fallen asleep in the cart, her feverish face peaceful for the first time all day. Sarah gently brushed her daughter's curls away from her forehead, trying to push down the panic that kept rising in her chest. Tomorrow she would figure out how to afford the medicine. Tomorrow she would find a way to make everything work. She had to. The line moved slowly, and Sarah found herself calculating and recalculating her total, making sure she had enough cash to cover everything. The woman in front of her was chatting pleasantly with the cashier about the weather and some upcoming charity event. Her voice had a slight southern accent, warm and genuine, the kind of voice that made you feel like you'd known the speaker for years. Sarah checked her phone and realized it was already 4:30. She needed to get Emma home and try to get some food in her before she became too tired to eat. Then she would spend the evening making calls, trying to figure out how to come up with $150 for medicine that her daughter needed to get better. As the line continued to crawl forward, Emma stirred in the cart and looked up at her mother with glassy eyes. "Mama, are we almost home?" "Almost, baby girl. Just a few more minutes, and then we'll have some nice warm soup, okay?" Emma nodded and closed her eyes again, her breathing still labored but steady. Sarah kissed the top of her head and whispered a prayer to whoever might be listening, that somehow, some way, everything would work out. The woman in front of them finished her transaction and began loading her numerous bags into her cart. Sarah moved forward, unloading her modest purchase onto the conveyor belt. Soup, bread, milk, apples, cough medicine, the basics of survival, nothing more. The cashier, a teenager named Michael Foster according to his name tag, scanned her items with practiced efficiency. $24.67, he announced. Sarah handed him a 20 and a 5, getting back 33 cents in change. She loaded her groceries into a single plastic bag and lifted Emma from the cart, grateful that her daughter was small enough to carry when necessary. The walk home took 15 minutes, with Sarah carrying both Emma and the grocery bag. The October air was getting colder as the sun began to set, and she could feel Emma shivering despite her jacket. By the time they reached their apartment building, Sarah was out of breath, and her arms were aching, but she was determined not to put Emma down on the dirty sidewalk. Mrs. Betty Johnson, their 70-year-old neighbor, was checking her mail when they arrived. Betty had lived in the building for 30 years and had appointed herself the unofficial guardian of all the families with young children. "Oh my goodness. Is Emma all right?" Betty asked, immediately noticing Emma's flushed cheeks and listless demeanor. "She's got bronchitis," Sarah explained, shifting Emma's weight as she fumbled for her keys. "We went to the doctor this morning. Poor little angel. You let me know if you need anything, honey. I made too much chicken and dumplings yesterday. I could bring some over later." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes at the kindness. "That's so sweet of you, Mrs. Johnson. We might take you up on that." Inside their apartment, Sarah settled Emma on the couch with her favorite blanket and put on a cartoon. The small space felt warm and safe after the stress of the day, but the unpaid bills on the counter served as a constant reminder of the challenges waiting for them. As she heated up the soup, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Jennifer Walsh, her friend from her old receptionist job who had helped her find some of her current work. "Hey Sarah, I heard through the grapevine that you might be looking for some extra work." Sarah's heart leaped with hope. "Definitely. What do you have?" "My cousin owns a catering company, and they need servers for a big event this Saturday night. It pays $15 an hour plus tips, and it's usually a 6-hour event. But it's formal service. You'd need black dress pants and a white button-down shirt." Sarah did quick math in her head. $90 plus tips could be exactly what she needed to afford Emma's medicine and maybe catch up on some bills. But she didn't own the required uniform pieces. "I'm definitely interested. Let me figure out the clothing situation and get back to you tonight." "Sure thing. Just let me know by 10 p.m. so I can tell him." After Jennifer hung up, Sarah looked through her small closet. She had one pair of black pants that might work, but they were more casual than formal, and her only white button-down was stained and too worn for professional catering service. She could probably find what she needed at a thrift store for under $20, but that would mean less money for Emma's medicine. Emma appeared in the doorway, dragging her blanket behind her. "Mama, I'm hungry." "Soup's almost ready, sweetheart." Sarah ladled the chicken noodle soup into Emma's favorite bowl, a pink plastic one with cartoon princesses that had cost $3 at the dollar store but made Emma feel special. They ate together on the couch, Emma managing about half her soup before curling up against Sarah's side. The cough medicine seemed to be helping a little, but Sarah knew it was no substitute for the prescription medications they couldn't afford. As Emma dozed against her shoulder, Sarah stared out their single window at the Nashville skyline in the distance. Somewhere out there, the music industry she had once dreamed of joining continued to thrive. Artists performed in venues she'd once hoped to work in, making money that would solve all her current problems without a second thought. But those dreams felt like they belonged to a different person now. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jake Morrison, Emma's father. It was the first time she'd heard from him in 6 months. "Hey, saw on Facebook that Emma's been sick. Everything okay?" Sarah stared at the message for a long time. Jake lived in Atlanta now, working for a marketing firm and dating a woman named Amanda Richardson, who posted pictures of their weekend trips to expensive restaurants and vacation destinations. He sent a child support check for $200 every month, which was better than nothing, but barely covered a week's worth of expenses for Emma. She typed and deleted several responses. Part of her wanted to tell him exactly how hard things were, how she was choosing between medicine for their daughter and keeping the lights on. But pride and experience had taught her that Jake's sympathy was usually short-lived and never came with practical solutions. "She'll be fine. Thanks for asking." His response was immediate. "Good. Let me know if you need anything." But they both knew he didn't really mean it, and even if he did, $100 or $200 wasn't going to change their fundamental situation. Sarah was on her own, the way she'd been since the day she told him she was pregnant, and watched his face change as he realized his carefully planned future was about to be disrupted. Emma stirred in her arms, coughing softly. Sarah held her closer, making silent promises about the medicine they'd get tomorrow, the bills they'd figure out how to pay, the stability she'd somehow create for both of them. Outside, Nashville's evening rush hour created a steady hum of traffic. People were heading home to houses with spare bedrooms and full medicine cabinets and checking accounts that could handle unexpected expenses. Sarah envied them, but she also felt a fierce pride in what she'd built for Emma, however modest it might be. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they were warm and fed and together. Sometimes, Sarah had learned, that had to be enough. As Emma's breathing evened out in sleep, Sarah carefully moved her to the bed and tucked her in with extra blankets. Then she sat at their small kitchen table with a notebook and a calculator, working on the puzzle of their finances. Rent, utilities, groceries, medicine, daycare. No matter how she arranged the numbers, they never quite added up to a solution. But she would find a way. She always did. Outside their window, the lights of Nashville twinkled like stars, full of dreams and possibilities that felt both impossibly distant and somehow still within reach. Sarah woke up at 4 a.m. to the sound of Emma crying. The fever had returned with a vengeance, and her daughter's skin felt hot and clammy despite the cool October air seeping through their apartment windows. The cough had deepened overnight, becoming more painful and frequent. "Mama, it hurts," Emma whimpered, pointing to her chest. Sarah's heart clenched as she gathered Emma into her arms, feeling the heat radiating from her small body. She gave her daughter another dose of the over-the-counter fever reducer and the cough medicine, but she knew these were just temporary measures. Emma needed the prescription antibiotics. After a restless night of checking Emma's temperature every hour, Sarah made a decision that went against every principle of financial responsibility she'd learned from her parents. She would put Emma's medicine on her credit card. The card she'd kept for absolute emergencies, the one with a $500 limit and a 24% interest rate that she'd never used because she was terrified of falling into the debt trap that had destroyed so many families she'd known growing up. But this was exactly the kind of emergency the card was meant for. At 7 a.m., she called the pharmacy to make sure Emma's prescriptions were still being held. David Chen, the pharmacist from yesterday, answered with professional courtesy. "Yes, Mrs. Thompson. We have both prescriptions ready. Will you be paying by cash or card today?" "Card," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll be there within the hour." She bundled Emma in warm clothes and made the familiar walk to the Kroger, this time with purpose instead of desperation. The morning was crisp and clear, with that particular quality of light that made Nashville look almost magical despite the urban sprawl and traffic. At the pharmacy counter, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anxiety as she handed David her credit card. The transaction went through without incident, and she tucked the prescription bottles into her purse like precious treasure. "Make sure she takes the antibiotic with food," David reminded her, "and don't stop giving it to her even if she starts feeling better. The full 10 days is important." "I understand. Thank you." Back home, Sarah gave Emma the first doses of both medications and then called her supervisor at Peterson Family Cleaning Services, where she worked Tuesday through Thursday. "Mrs. Charlotte Peterson, it's Sarah Thompson. I need to ask if there's any way I could pick up some extra houses this week. I know the schedule is usually set, but if anyone cancels, or if you have any emergency cleanings. Charlotte Peterson, a woman in her mid-50s who had built her small business from nothing, was understanding but honest. I wish I could help, honey, but we're actually slow this week. 3 of our regular clients are out of town. But I'll keep you in mind if anything comes up. Sarah thanked her and hung up, then made similar calls to the other parents she occasionally babysat for on weekends. Everyone was sympathetic, but no one needed extra help right away. The catering job Jennifer had mentioned was still a possibility, but Sarah would need to invest in the proper clothes first, and even then, it wouldn't pay until after the event. She spent the rest of the morning researching assistance programs online while Emma dozed fitfully on the couch. The Tennessee Department of Human Services had emergency assistance programs, but the application process took weeks. Local churches offered help with utilities, but most required attendance at services or completion of financial counseling programs. Everything had requirements, waiting periods, and bureaucratic hurdles that didn't account for the immediate reality of rent due in 2 days. Around noon, Emma's fever broke temporarily, and she managed to eat some applesauce and crackers. The antibiotics seemed to be helping already, though Sarah knew it would take a few days to see the full effect. "Mama, can we go outside?" Emma asked, her first sign of energy in 2 days. Sarah looked out at the sunny afternoon and made another decision that prioritized Emma's well-being over practical concerns. "Let's go to the park for a little while. The fresh air might be good for you." Shelby Park was a 15-minute walk from their apartment, a green oasis in their neighborhood that offered free entertainment and a playground where Emma could run and play with other children. Sarah had discovered it during their first week in Nashville and had made it their special place, where they would go for picnics made of peanut butter sandwiches and for adventures that didn't cost anything but imagination. Emma perked up as soon as she saw the familiar playground equipment, though Sarah could tell she was still not at full strength. They found a bench in the sunshine, and Sarah watched as Emma played quietly on the swings, her movements slower and more careful than usual. "She's adorable," said a voice beside her. Sarah turned to see another mother, probably in her early 30s, pushing a baby in a stroller while keeping an eye on a toddler on the climbing structure. "Thank you. That's your little one on the slide?" "That's Marcus, and this is baby Lily." The woman extended her hand. "I'm Andrea Davis. I don't think I've seen you here before." "Sarah Thompson, and that's Emma on the swings. We come here pretty regularly, but usually in the mornings." Andrea had the look of someone whose life was more stable than Sarah's. Her stroller was newer, her clothes were newer, and she had that air of casual confidence that came from not having to calculate the cost of a trip to the playground. "How old is Emma?" Andrea asked. "She just turned 3. She's been sick the last couple of days, but I think she's starting to feel better." "Oh, poor thing. It's so hard when they're not feeling well. Marcus just got over a stomach bug that kept us up for 3 nights straight." They chatted easily about the challenges of parenting and the benefits of Nashville's park system. Andrea mentioned that she worked part-time as a graphic designer while her husband managed a music venue downtown. It sounded like the kind of balanced life Sarah had once imagined for herself. "What do you do?" Andrea asked. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then decided on honesty. "I clean houses and babysit mostly. Whatever I can find, really." That must be exhausting with a 3-year-old. "Some days are harder than others," Sarah admitted. "But we make it work." Andrea's expression was understanding rather than pitying, which Sarah appreciated. "If you're ever looking for babysitting work, I might know some families. My book club is full of working mothers who are always looking for reliable childcare." Sarah felt a spark of hope. "That would be amazing. I have references if anyone needs them." "Let me get your number. I'll ask around and see what I can find." They exchanged contact information, and Sarah felt like she'd made a genuine connection for the first time in months. It was easy to become isolated as a single mother, especially when money was tight and social activities felt like unaffordable luxuries. Emma had climbed to the top of the slide and was waving at Sarah with a smile that looked almost like her normal, healthy self. The afternoon sun was warm on Sarah's face, and for a few minutes, she allowed herself to imagine that things might actually be getting better. When they got home around 3 p.m., there was a notice taped to their apartment door. Sarah's heart sank as she recognized the letterhead from their management company. Notice to quit or pay rent. You are hereby notified that your rent is past due. You have 72 hours to pay the outstanding balance of $675. Leave $0 or vacate the premises. Sarah stared at the paper, her hands shaking slightly. She'd known rent was due, but seeing the official notice made it feel more real and more urgent. 72 hours meant Saturday. It was Wednesday afternoon. Inside the apartment, she sat at the kitchen table with her notebook and calculator, working through the numbers again. The credit card payment for Emma's medicine had used up her emergency buffer. Her cleaning job paycheck on Friday would be $180. She could potentially earn $90 plus tips from the catering job on Saturday, but she'd need to spend money she didn't have on the required uniform pieces. Her phone rang, showing Jennifer Walsh's number. "Hey, Sarah. I need an answer about the catering job. Can you do it?" Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Yes, I'll make it work with the uniform." "Great, I'll text you the details. It's at the Hutton Hotel downtown, so it's a pretty fancy event. The company is really particular about appearance, but the tips are usually excellent." After Jennifer hung up, Sarah bundled Emma back into her jacket. "Come on, sweetheart, we need to go shopping." The Goodwill store on Nolensville Pike was busy with the late afternoon crowd. Sarah had shopped there many times over the past 3 years, finding everything from Emma's winter coats to their kitchen dishes. But today felt different. Today she was shopping for something that represented hope and possibility rather than just necessity. In the women's section, she found a white button-down shirt that looked professional and fit reasonably well for $4.99. The black pants were harder. Most of the options were either too casual or too formal, or the wrong size. Finally, she found a pair of black dress pants that were slightly too long, but otherwise perfect for $7.99. "Look, Mama," Emma called from the children's section, holding up a small stuffed animal. A brown teddy bear that was missing one button eye, but was otherwise in good condition. "Can we get him?" Sarah looked at the price tag. $1.99. In the context of their current financial situation, it was a frivolous expense. But Emma had been so sick and scared, and the little bear seemed to bring her genuine joy. "What's his name?" Sarah asked. "Mr. Buttons, because he only has one button eye." "I think Mr. Buttons needs a home, don't you?" Emma's face lit up with the first real smile Sarah had seen in days. Sometimes the smallest things made the biggest difference. The total came to $14.97, leaving Sarah with about $50 in cash and whatever was left on her credit card. She tried not to think about the interest that would accumulate on Emma's medicine or how she'd pay the credit card bill when it came next month. Back home, Emma played with Mr. Buttons, while Sarah tried on her new uniform pieces and made minor adjustments with safety pins and a sewing kit she'd bought at the dollar store. The outfit wasn't perfect, but it would pass inspection at a formal catering event. That evening, Emma's appetite returned enough for her to eat a whole bowl of soup and some toast with jam. Her fever stayed down, and the cough was noticeably less frequent. The antibiotics were working. "Mama," Emma said, as Sarah was tucking her into bed, "are you sad about something?" Sarah smoothed Emma's curls away from her forehead, struck by her daughter's perceptiveness even at 3 years old. "Sometimes mamas worry about grown-up things, but that's not for you to worry about, okay? My job is to take care of us, and I'm doing my best. I love you, Mama. I love you too, sweetheart, more than all the stars in the sky." After Emma fell asleep, Sarah sat at the kitchen table and made a list of everyone she could potentially ask for help. It was a short list. Her sister Jessica, who was dealing with her own husband's unemployment, her college friend Michelle Brooks, who lived in Seattle and hadn't responded to Sarah's last few texts, and Jake Morrison, Emma's father, who had already made it clear that his monthly child support payment was the extent of his involvement. She picked up her phone 3 different times to call Jake, and 3 times she put it down. Finally, around 11 p.m., she typed out a text message. Emma's been sick with bronchitis. Medicine was expensive and rent is due. Could you possibly send an extra $200 this month? I'll pay you back when I can. She stared at the message for 10 minutes before deleting it. Jake would either ignore it completely or respond with some version of, "I already pay child support," and either response would make her feel worse than she already did. Instead, she opened her laptop and spent an hour applying for every job posting she could find that offered flexible hours or immediate employment, retail positions, restaurant work, data entry jobs that could be done from home, anything that might bring in extra income without requiring her to find additional childcare. At midnight, exhausted and no closer to a solution, Sarah finally went to bed on the couch. But she lay awake listening to Emma's improved breathing and feeling grateful for the small victory of her daughter's recovering health. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, Emma was safe and healing. The next morning, Thursday, brought both good news and bad news. The good news was that Emma woke up with no fever and much more energy. The bad news was a text from Charlotte Peterson. "Sarah, the Morrison family had a pipe burst and need emergency cleaning today. 4 hours, $80. Are you available?" Sarah nearly cried with relief. It wasn't enough to solve all their problems, but $80 would help. She texted back immediately, "Yes, what time?" 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., 1247 Belmont Boulevard. Sarah arranged for Mrs. Betty Johnson to watch Emma for the morning, promising to pay her $20 when she got back. Betty waved off the money concern. "Don't worry about paying me until things settle down, honey. That little angel is never any trouble." The Morrison family, no relation to Jake, thankfully, lived in a beautiful house in the Belmont area with hardwood floors and modern fixtures and the kind of kitchen Sarah dreamed of cooking in. The pipe had burst in their basement, causing water damage that required extensive cleaning and drying. Sarah worked steadily for 4 hours, moving furniture, running fans, and cleaning water stains from surfaces. Mrs. Rebecca Morrison was apologetic about the emergency nature of the job and the mess involved. "I'm so sorry about all this," she said, surveying the basement that looked like a disaster zone. "I know it's not the most pleasant work." Sarah smiled while wringing out another towel. "Don't worry about it, Mrs. Morrison. I'm just grateful for the work." When the job was finished, Mrs. Morrison handed Sarah $100 instead of the agreed-upon $80. "You work so hard, and you probably saved us thousands in potential damage. Thank you." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes at the unexpected kindness. "Thank you so much. You have no idea how much this helps." Walking home with $100 in her pocket, Sarah felt a cautious optimism she hadn't experienced in months. Combined with her Friday paycheck and the Saturday catering job, she might actually be able to make rent. It would be close, but it was possible. Emma was feeling well enough to walk to the grocery store that afternoon, and Sarah decided to celebrate their small victory with a proper dinner. She bought ingredients for Emma's favorite meal, spaghetti with meat sauce, and even splurged on a small container of ice cream for dessert. As they walked through the store, Emma chattering happily about Mr. Buttons and asking questions about everything she saw, Sarah felt something she'd almost forgotten: the simple pleasure of providing for her daughter without constant anxiety about money. But as they approached the checkout line, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from the property management company. "Reminder: rent payment must be received by 5 p.m. Saturday, or eviction proceedings will begin Monday." The brief moment of relief evaporated, replaced by the familiar knot of worry in her stomach. Even with the extra money from today and her potential earnings over the next 2 days, she would be cutting it extremely close. The checkout line was long, filled with people doing their weekly shopping. Sarah found herself behind the same well-dressed woman with the red hair who had been in front of her 2 days earlier. Today the woman was buying simpler items: salad ingredients, some fruit, a small bottle of wine. She moved with the same quiet confidence, but there was something more approachable about her today. Emma, feeling much better, was being chatty and friendly in the way that 3-year-olds could be with strangers. "I like your hair," Emma announced to the woman in front of them. "It's pretty like a princess." The woman turned around with a warm smile. "Well, thank you, sweetheart. You're very kind." Sarah felt her cheeks flush slightly. "I'm sorry, she's feeling better today, and apparently that means complimenting everyone." "Don't apologize, she just made my day." The woman's accent was distinctly southern, warm and musical. "What's your name, honey?" "Emma Thompson, and I have a new friend named Mr. Buttons." Emma held up the teddy bear she'd insisted on bringing to the store. "Mr. Buttons is very handsome. I'm Reba." Something about the name tugged at Sarah's memory, but she couldn't quite place it. The woman, Reba, had the kind of presence that suggested she was someone important. But she spoke to Emma with genuine interest, rather than the polite dismissal that many adults showed to small children. "Mama, look! They have the good crackers!" Emma pointed to a display near the checkout line. Sarah glanced at the crackers Emma was pointing to, the organic, expensive kind that cost 3 times as much as the store brand they usually bought. "Those are a little too expensive for us right now, sweetheart." "But they taste like cheese!" Emma's voice was getting louder, the way it did when she was building up to a tantrum. Sarah felt the familiar combination of embarrassment and frustration that came with having to explain financial limitations to a 3-year-old in public. "I know, but we need to save our money for more important things." Reba, who had been listening to the exchange, turned around again. "You know, I have a weakness for those crackers too. They really do taste like cheese." The line moved forward, and soon Reba was paying for her groceries. Sarah watched her interact with the cashier, friendly and patient, asking about his classes at Nashville Community College and wishing him luck with his upcoming exams. It was the kind of genuine interest in other people that seemed increasingly rare. When it was Sarah's turn, she unloaded her groceries onto the conveyor belt. Spaghetti, ground beef, sauce, salad ingredients, milk, and the small container of ice cream. A modest celebration dinner that still cost more than she usually spent. The total came to $31. 47 times, well within her budget for the first time in months. Sarah handed the cashier 2 20s and waited for her change, feeling proud that she could afford to buy Emma a proper meal and dessert without stress. But as the cashier counted back her change, he paused and recounted the bills in the register drawer. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't have enough change. I need to call a manager to open another register." Sarah's heart sank as she realized what this meant. A delay, a line of impatient customers behind her, and the kind of public attention she always tried to avoid. The people behind her in line began to shift restlessly as the cashier called for help. "It's okay," Sarah said quickly. "I can use my card instead." But as she reached for her credit card, she remembered that she'd already used nearly the full limit for Emma's medicine. There might be enough left for $31, but there might not be. And if the card was declined in front of all these people? "I'm sorry," she told the cashier, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "Let me just reorganize this. I can put some things back." Emma, who had been playing quietly with Mr. Buttons, suddenly realized what was happening. "Mama, what about the ice cream?" The question cut through Sarah like a knife. She had promised Emma ice cream, had been looking forward to sharing that small treat together, and now she was going to have to explain why they couldn't afford something as simple as a $4 container of vanilla ice cream. "Here," said a familiar voice behind her. "Let me get this." Sarah turned to see Reba McEntire, and suddenly she realized why the name had sounded familiar, standing behind her with her purse already open. The country music superstar was discreetly pulling out her credit card, her expression kind but matter-of-fact. "Oh no, I couldn't," Sarah started to protest. "It's already done," Reba said gently, handing her card to the confused cashier. "We've all been there, honey." The transaction completed quickly, and Sarah found herself standing with her groceries, completely overwhelmed by the kindness of this stranger who wasn't actually a stranger at all, but one of the most famous singers in Nashville. "I don't know how to thank you," Sarah managed to say as they walked toward the store exit together. "You don't need to thank me," Reba replied. "Just enjoy that ice cream with your beautiful daughter." Emma, oblivious to who had helped them, was tugging on Reba's jacket. "Thank you for helping my mama. She works really hard." Reba knelt down to Emma's eye level, her expression serious. "Your mama seems like a very special person. You're lucky to have her." "I know," Emma said with the confidence of a child who had never doubted her mother's love. As they reached the parking lot, Sarah felt compelled to explain. "I'm not usually... we're going through a rough patch, but I have a job this weekend, and things are going to get better." Reba's smile was warm and understanding. "Honey, we all need help sometimes. There's no shame in accepting kindness when it's offered." They stood in the parking lot for a moment, the evening air cool but comfortable. Sarah wanted to say something profound, something that would convey how much this simple act of kindness meant, but words felt inadequate. "I hope things turn around for you soon," Reba said finally. "They will," Sarah replied, and for the first time in months, she actually believed it. Reba McEntire walked toward a modest SUV, much less flashy than Sarah would have expected for someone of her fame, while Sarah and Emma made their way to the bus stop. As they waited for the bus, Emma talked excitedly about the nice lady who had helped them, completely unaware that she'd just met country music royalty. On the bus ride home, Sarah reflected on the evening's events. A stranger, albeit a very famous stranger, had seen her in a moment of need and had helped without being asked, without making a big show of it, and without making Sarah feel like a charity case. It was exactly the kind of kindness the world needed more of. At home, they cooked dinner together, Emma standing on a chair beside the stove to help stir the sauce. The spaghetti was perfect, the salad was fresh, and the ice cream was every bit as delicious as Emma had hoped. They ate by the light of the small lamp in their living room, talking about their day and making plans for the weekend. "Mama," Emma said as Sarah was giving her a bath later that night, "why did that lady help us at the store?" Sarah paused, washcloth in hand, thinking about how to explain the concept of kindness to a 3-year-old. "Sometimes people help each other just because it's the right thing to do. When we see someone who needs help, and we're able to help them, it makes us feel good to do something nice. Like when you help Mrs. Johnson carry her groceries. Exactly like that. And someday when I'm big, I can help people too. I hope you always want to help people, sweetheart." As Sarah tucked Emma into bed, she felt a sense of gratitude that went beyond the practical help they'd received. Meeting Reba McEntire had reminded her that there was still genuine kindness in the world, and that their struggles were temporary while the connections between people could be lasting. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer about the catering job. "Event starts at 6 p.m. Saturday. Arrive at 5 p.m. for setup. Address: Hutton Hotel, 1808 West End AV. Ask for Marcus Williams in catering." Sarah looked at the address and felt a flutter of anxiety. The Hutton Hotel was in one of Nashville's most upscale areas, the kind of place where she'd never stayed but had always admired from the outside. Tomorrow she would be serving food to people who could afford a single dinner that cost more than her weekly grocery budget. But she would also be earning money that could save their home, and that made any amount of intimidation worth it. As she settled onto the couch for the night, Sarah thought about Reba McEntire's words. "We all need help sometimes." It was a simple statement, but it carried the weight of truth and experience. Everyone, regardless of their circumstances, had moments when they needed someone else's kindness to get through the day. Sarah fell asleep, thinking about how she might be able to pay that kindness forward someday, when Emma was older and their situation was more stable. She imagined being in a position to help another struggling parent, to be the stranger who stepped in when someone needed it most. Outside, Nashville hummed with its usual evening energy, musicians heading to late-night gigs, families settling in for the night, dreams being chased and sometimes caught. And in apartment 2B, a young mother and her daughter slept peacefully, surrounded by the kind of hope that comes from unexpected kindness and the promise of better days ahead. Friday morning brought a text from Andrea Davis, the mother Sarah had met at the park. "Hi, Sarah. 2 families from my book club need babysitting help. One needs someone tonight, Friday, from 6:10 p.m. for $60. The other needs weekend help regularly. Are you interested?" Sarah stared at the message, calculating quickly. The Friday babysitting job would conflict with her need to prepare for Saturday's catering event. but $60 was significant money. She texted back, "Definitely interested in both. Can I get details about tonight?" Andrea's response came quickly with an address in the Green Hills area and contact information for Rachel and David Martinez, parents of a 5-year-old named Sophie. Sarah called immediately, introducing herself and providing references from other families she'd worked for. "Andrea spoke very highly of you," Rachel Martinez said over the phone. "We just need someone reliable while we go to dinner for our anniversary." Sophie is pretty easy. She'll probably want to watch a movie and go to bed by 8:30. Sarah accepted the job, which meant she'd need to take Emma to Mrs. Johnson's apartment for the evening. Betty had offered to help whenever needed, and Sarah was beginning to understand that accepting help from neighbors and friends wasn't a sign of weakness, but a normal part of community life. Her regular Friday paycheck from Peterson Family Cleaning Services was exactly $180, as expected. Combined with the extra $100 from Thursday's emergency cleaning job and the $60 she'd earned babysitting tonight, Sarah would have $340. The catering job on Saturday could bring in another $90 to $120 plus tips. Even conservatively, she'd have enough for rent, with maybe $50 left over for groceries and utilities. The thought was both relieving and terrifying. She would make rent, but just barely. And there would be no buffer for unexpected expenses. Emma's medicine had been a perfect example. One sick child could derail their entire financial stability. But for now, they were going to be okay. Emma was feeling much better, her energy almost back to normal levels. She spent the morning playing with Mr. Buttons and helping Sarah organize their small apartment. They did laundry at the building's shared machines. Emma helping by sorting socks and talking to the other residents who came and went. "That little girl is just precious," said Mrs. Dorothy Williams, an elderly woman who lived on the first floor, always so polite and cheerful. Sarah felt the familiar surge of pride that came whenever someone complimented Emma. Despite their circumstances, despite the stress and uncertainty, Emma was growing up to be kind and resilient. That felt like Sarah's greatest accomplishment. At 5:30 p.m., Sarah dropped Emma off with Betty Johnson, who had prepared activities and snacks and seemed genuinely excited to spend the evening with her young neighbor. "Don't you worry about anything," Betty assured Sarah. "We'll have a wonderful time, won't we, Emma?" Emma nodded enthusiastically, already investigating Betty's collection of vintage picture books. The bus ride to Green Hills took 45 minutes through parts of Nashville that showcased the city's diversity, from modest neighborhoods like her own to increasingly upscale areas with manicured lawns and luxury cars. The Martinez family lived in a beautiful 2-story house with a circular driveway and mature trees that must have been planted decades earlier. Rachel Martinez met Sarah at the door, a woman in her early 30s with the kind of effortless style that came from having both time and money to spend on personal appearance. But her manner was warm and welcoming, without the condescension Sarah sometimes encountered from wealthier families. "Sarah, thank you so much for coming on short notice. Sophie is in the living room. She's been looking forward to meeting you." Sophie Martinez was a delightful 5-year-old with dark curls and her mother's friendly demeanor. She showed Sarah around the house with the pride of someone giving a tour of a palace, pointing out her favorite toys and books, and the family photos that chronicled vacations to places Sarah had only seen in magazines. "We'll be back by 10, David Martinez told Sarah as they prepared to leave. "Sophie's bedtime is 8:30, but she might try to negotiate for later. There's pizza in the refrigerator if you get hungry, and all our contact information is on the counter." After her parents left, Sophie and Sarah settled in the family's media room to watch Moana, a movie that Sophie had apparently seen dozens of times but still found entertaining. Sarah found herself relaxing into the evening, enjoying the simple pleasure of spending time with a child who wasn't sick or stressed, in a house where the electricity and heat worked perfectly and the refrigerator was full of food. "Do you have any kids?" Sophie asked during the movie. "I have a daughter named Emma. She's 3, a little younger than you." "Does she like movies?" "She loves movies. Maybe someday you two could meet and watch something together." Sophie seemed to think this was a wonderful idea and spent the next 20 minutes planning all the activities she and Emma could do together. Sarah listened with genuine interest. touched by the child's generous spirit and imagination. At 8:30, Sophie tried the predicted negotiation tactics. Just 5 more minutes. I'm not really tired, we haven't finished the movie, but she was ultimately cooperative about getting ready for bed. Sarah read her 2 stories and tucked her in with the practiced efficiency of someone who understood bedtime routines. The house was peaceful once Sophie was asleep, and Sarah found herself appreciating the quiet luxury of a space where everything worked properly and there were no worries about overdue bills or broken appliances. She did homework at the kitchen island, reviewing the catering service requirements for tomorrow and preparing mentally for what would be her most formal work environment yet. Rachel and David Martinez returned at 9:45 p.m., clearly having enjoyed their anniversary dinner. "How did everything go?" Rachel asked. "Perfectly. Sophie is a delightful child, so well-behaved and creative. She really seemed to like you," David added. "She was excited about meeting you all week after Andrea recommended you." Rachel handed Sarah $60 in cash, then hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Sarah, I hope this doesn't sound presumptuous, but Andrea mentioned that you might be looking for regular babysitting work. We've been talking about getting a regular date night, maybe twice a month. Would you be interested in something like that?" Sarah felt a surge of hope. Regular work, even if it was just twice monthly, would provide the kind of consistency that made budgeting possible. "I would definitely be interested. What kind of schedule were you thinking? Maybe every other Saturday evening? We could plan it in advance so you'd know the dates ahead of time." They exchanged contact information and tentatively scheduled the next babysitting session for 2 weeks later. As the bus carried Sarah back toward her neighborhood, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: optimism about the future. The evening had been a reminder that there were kind, reasonable people in the world who valued good childcare and were willing to pay fairly for it. If she could build relationships with several families like the Martinez family, she might be able to create the kind of income stability that would let her breathe a little easier. Back home, Emma was fast asleep in Betty's apartment, and Betty reported that they'd had a wonderful evening making cookies and reading stories. "That child has such a good heart," Betty told Sarah as they transferred sleeping Emma back to their own apartment. "She spent 20 minutes tonight organizing my button jar because she thought it would be helpful." Sarah looked down at Emma, peaceful in sleep, and felt the fierce love and protectiveness that defined her entire existence. Everything she did, every difficult job, every financial sacrifice, every moment of stress and worry, was for this small person who trusted her completely to make everything work out. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical October weather in Nashville that made the city feel moody and atmospheric. Sarah spent extra time on her appearance, knowing that the catering job would require her to interact with wealthy guests who would notice details like neat hair and pressed clothes. Her thrift store uniform pieces looked professional enough, and she'd managed to borrow a pair of black dress shoes from Betty Johnson, who had worked as a waitress decades earlier and understood the importance of comfortable, appropriate footwear. Emma was feeling well enough to spend the day with Betty, who had planned activities and seemed to genuinely enjoy spending time with her young neighbor. Sarah was beginning to understand that Betty's offers of help weren't just neighborly kindness. The elderly woman was genuinely lonely and found joy in Emma's company. "We're going to make a photo album of all her drawings," Betty told Sarah as they prepared for the day. She's quite the artist. The Hutton Hotel was in Nashville's prestigious West End area, surrounded by upscale restaurants and boutique shops that catered to tourists and affluent locals. Sarah had walked past the building many times, but never had reason to enter its elegant lobby. The employee entrance led to a basement area where the catering staff was assembling for the evening's event. Marcus Williams, the catering manager, was a man in his 40s with the kind of calm authority that came from years of managing high-end events. "You must be Sarah Thompson," he said, consulting his clipboard. "Jennifer Walsh recommended you. Have you worked formal catering before?" "No, but I have restaurant experience and I'm a quick learner," Sarah replied honestly. Marcus spent 20 minutes going over the evening's procedures, how to carry trays properly, how to interact with guests, how to handle special requests and dietary restrictions. The event was a private dinner for about 60 people, celebrating the opening of a new art gallery downtown. These guests are accustomed to excellent service, Marcus explained. Be friendly but professional, anticipate their needs, and always remember that you're representing not just yourself, but the entire hotel. Sarah was assigned to work with 3 other servers, all of whom had been doing this type of work for years. They were friendly and helpful, offering tips about managing multiple plates and navigating crowded rooms in dress shoes. The event space was on the hotel's top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of Nashville's skyline. Even on this cloudy evening, the city looked magical from this height, all twinkling lights and urban energy. The guests began arriving at 6:30 p.m., and Sarah got her first close look at Nashville's art and business community. The women wore designer dresses and jewelry that probably cost more than Sarah's annual income. The men were dressed in perfectly tailored suits and spoke with the casual confidence of people accustomed to being the most important person in any room. But as the evening progressed, Sarah discovered that most of the guests were genuinely pleasant. They said please and thank you, asked about her evening, and treated the service staff with respect. A few were demanding or dismissive, but they were the exception rather than the rule. "Excuse me, miss," said a woman in an elegant black dress. "Could I possibly get another glass of the white wine?" "Of course," Sarah replied, already moving toward the bar station. "Thank you so much. You've been so attentive all evening." These small interactions reminded Sarah that good service was noticed and appreciated, even in environments where excellent service was expected as a baseline. Around 9 p.m., as the dinner service was winding down and transitioning to dessert and coffee, Sarah found herself serving drinks to a group of guests who were discussing the challenges facing Nashville's arts community. "The problem is that artists can't afford to live in the city anymore," one man was saying. "All the creative energy that made Nashville special is being priced out." "It's not just artists," replied a woman with gray hair and expensive jewelry. "Teachers, nurses, service workers, anyone who makes an honest living is struggling to afford housing." Sarah listened as she cleared empty glasses, struck by how these wealthy people seemed genuinely concerned about issues that affected her daily life, even if they approached them from a completely different perspective. The conversation reminded her of something Reba McEntire had said the day before. "We all need help sometimes." Even people with significant resources recognized that the community was stronger when everyone had opportunities to succeed. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Sarah helped with the cleanup process, clearing tables, washing dishes, and restoring the event space to its original condition. The work was physically demanding after 5 hours of being on her feet, but she felt energized by having successfully completed her first formal catering event. Marcus Williams approached her as the staff was finishing up. "Sarah, you did excellent work tonight. Several guests mentioned how professional and attentive you were." Sarah felt a flush of pride. "Thank you. I really enjoyed it. We have events most weekends, and we're always looking for reliable people. Would you be interested in regular work?" The question felt like a gift. Regular catering work could provide the kind of income that would let her worry less about basic expenses and start thinking about longer-term goals like finding a better apartment or even going back to school. "Absolutely. I'd love to be part of your regular team." Marcus handed her an envelope with her payment, 115s, which included $25 in tips beyond the base pay. It was more money than she'd expected, and it came at exactly the right moment. "I'll call you next week with our upcoming schedule. Usually we need people Friday and Saturday nights, sometimes Sundays for special events." The bus ride home took Sarah through downtown Nashville, past the neon lights of Broadway and the venues where dreams were made and sometimes broken. But tonight, she felt like her own dreams were becoming more possible rather than less. At home, Emma was fast asleep in Betty's apartment again, and Betty reported another successful evening of activities and early bedtime cooperation. "She's such a good child, Sarah. You should be very proud of how you're raising her." Back in their own apartment, Sarah sat at the kitchen table and counted the weekend's earnings. The babysitting job had brought in $60. The catering work had earned $115. Combined with her regular paycheck and the emergency cleaning job from Thursday, she had $355 in cash. Rent was $675. She was still short, but not by as much as she'd feared. If she could pick up one more small job, or if the catering tips had been slightly better than expected, she might actually make it. But even if she came up a little short, she now had regular work prospects that would make future months more manageable. The Martinez family wanted her for regular date nights. Marcus Williams had offered her consistent catering work. She was building the kind of professional relationships that could provide income stability. For the first time in months, Sarah felt like she was moving forward rather than just trying not to fall further behind. As she prepared for bed on the couch, Sarah thought about the contrast between her life and the lives of the people she'd served that evening. They lived in a different world, with different concerns and different resources. But the fundamental human experiences, kindness, work, family, community, were universal. Tomorrow she would figure out how to cover the remaining rent shortfall, but tonight she would go to sleep knowing that Emma was healthy, that they had food in the refrigerator, and that there were people in their community who had noticed her efforts and wanted to help her succeed. Outside their window, Nashville continued its eternal hum of ambition and music and dreams. And in apartment 2B, a young mother fell asleep, counting not just money, but possibilities. Sunday morning brought an unexpected phone call from Rachel Martinez. "Sarah, I hope I'm not calling too early. I have a somewhat unusual request." Rachel's voice carried excitement mixed with apology. "My sister lives in Brentwood, and she's hosting a last-minute dinner party tonight. Her regular babysitter canceled, and she desperately needs someone to watch her twin 8-year-olds. I told her about you. Would you be available? It pays $100 for 4 hours. Sarah's heart jumped. $100 would put her just over the amount she needed for rent, with a small cushion for other expenses. "I'm definitely available." "What time and where?" 6 to 10 p.m. in Brentwood. The twins are pretty self-sufficient, but they're high energy. My sister's name is Laura Mitchell. I'll text you the address. After hanging up, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. Just when she needed it most, work had found her. The weekend that had started with panic about rent was ending with enough money to cover their basic expenses and maybe even a small emergency fund. Emma spent the morning playing quietly while Sarah did household tasks and prepared for the evening's babysitting job. Emma's health had improved dramatically. The antibiotics had cleared up the bronchitis, and she was back to her normal, energetic self. "Mama, can we go to the park today?" Emma asked, looking up from where she was drawing with crayons at the kitchen table. Sarah looked outside at the sunny October afternoon. The weather was perfect, and they both needed fresh air and exercise after several days of being cooped up due to Emma's illness. "That's a great idea. Let's pack some snacks and make it a little adventure." They walked to Shelby Park with a small picnic, peanut butter sandwiches, apple slices, and a thermos of water. Emma ran ahead on the path, pointing out dogs and birds and interesting leaves, her joy infectious in the way that only children's happiness could be. At the playground, Emma made friends with other children while Sarah sat on a bench and watched her daughter navigate the social dynamics of preschooler interactions. Emma was naturally kind and inclusive, traits that Sarah hoped would serve her well throughout her life. "She's adorable," said a voice beside her. Sarah turned to see a woman about her age pushing a baby in a swing. "Thank you. Is that your little one?" "This is Michael. He's 10 months old. I'm Jennifer Walsh, by the way." Sarah did a double take. "Jennifer Walsh, who recommended me for the catering job?" Jennifer's face lit up with recognition. "Sarah, yes. How did it go last night?" "It went really well. Marcus offered me regular work, which could be life-changing for us." They talked easily about parenting and work and the challenges of balancing financial necessities with family time. Jennifer mentioned that her husband worked in Nashville's music industry and that they'd moved to the city 3 years earlier from Ohio. "It's a tough city to get established in," Jennifer said. "But once you start building connections, things can snowball in a positive way pretty quickly." Sarah had noticed this already. Meeting Andrea at the park, had led to babysitting work with the Martinez family, which had led to the recommendation for catering work, which was leading to regular employment. Nashville's reputation as a networking city wasn't just about the music business. "Can I ask you something?" Jennifer said after a pause. "How long have you been doing this on your own?" "Emma's father and I split up when she was 6 months old. So about 2.5 years of it being just us." Jennifer's expression was sympathetic but not pitying. "That takes incredible strength. I can barely manage with my husband's help." "Some days are definitely harder than others," Sarah admitted. "But we're building something together, Emma and me. It might not look like a traditional family, but it's ours." As they talked, Sarah realized how much she'd missed adult conversation and connection. The past few months of financial stress had made her increasingly isolated, focused entirely on survival rather than community. But meeting people like Andrea, the Martinez family, and Jennifer was reminding her that she didn't have to do everything alone. Emma eventually tired herself out on the playground equipment and came over to where Sarah and Jennifer were sitting, her cheeks flushed with exercise and happiness. "Mama, I made friends with twins. They're 8 years old, and they know how to ride bikes without training wheels." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Are you ready to go home and get cleaned up?" As they prepared to leave, Jennifer handed Sarah her business card. "I organize a monthly playgroup for parents in our area. It's very informal. We meet at different parks and the kids play while the adults talk. You should come next time. Emma would love it, and it might be nice for you to meet other parents." Sarah tucked the card into her purse, feeling grateful for the invitation. Building a social network as a single parent was challenging, but it was also necessary for both her and Emma's well-being. The bus ride to Brentwood took nearly an hour, traveling through increasingly affluent neighborhoods until they reached the address Rachel Martinez had provided. Laura Mitchell's house was even more impressive than her sister's, a sprawling colonial-style home with a circular driveway and landscaping that looked professionally maintained. Laura Mitchell met Sarah at the door, a woman in her late 30s with the same warm demeanor as her sister, but a higher energy level that probably came from managing twin boys. "Sarah, Rachel has told me such wonderful things about you. Come in, come in. Let me introduce you to the chaos." The twins, Connor and Ethan Mitchell, were indeed high energy. Both 8 years old, they were in constant motion, building something with Legos in the living room while simultaneously discussing their favorite video games and arguing about the rules of a card game they'd apparently invented themselves. "Boys, this is Sarah. She's going to hang out with you while Mom and Dad have their dinner party." Connor and Ethan looked up from their project long enough to say polite hellos before returning to their intense debate about Lego architecture. Laura showed Sarah around the house, pointing out snacks, emergency contact information, and the boys' bedtime routine. The house was beautifully decorated but clearly lived in, with the comfortable chaos that came from a family that prioritized function over perfection. "They're good kids," Laura assured Sarah as they prepared to leave. "They'll probably want to show you every toy they own and teach you 17 different games, but they're cooperative about bedtime when the time comes." David Mitchell, Laura's husband, added, "There's pizza in the freezer if anyone gets hungry, and don't hesitate to call if you need anything at all." After their parents left, Connor and Ethan gave Sarah the promised tour of their toys and games, their enthusiasm boundless and endearing. They showed her their rock collection, their basketball hoop in the backyard, their extensive library of children's books, and their elaborate train set in the basement. "Do you have any kids?" Ethan asked as they settled in the living room to play a board game. "I have a daughter named Emma. She's 3 years old." "Does she like trains?" Connor asked hopefully. "She's never really played with trains, but I think she'd love them." The boys spent the next hour planning all the things they would show Emma if she ever came to visit. Their generosity and inclusion reminding Sarah of how naturally kind children could be when they weren't taught to see differences as barriers. As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself enjoying the boys' company immensely. They were bright and funny, full of questions about everything from why clouds moved to how airplanes stayed in the sky. Their bedtime routine was surprisingly smooth. They were clearly accustomed to consistent rules and expectations. Around 9:30, As the boys were settled in bed with their bedtime stories read, Sarah tidied the living room and reflected on how different this house felt from her own apartment. It wasn't just the size or the expensive furnishings. It was the sense of security that permeated everything. These children would never worry about whether their parents could afford medicine or groceries. They would grow up assuming that basic needs would always be met, that dreams were achievable, that the world was generally a safe and supportive place. Sarah didn't resent them for their advantages, but she did feel a fierce determination that Emma would somehow have access to similar opportunities. Maybe not the same level of material comfort, but the same sense of possibility and security. Laura and David Mitchell returned at exactly 10 p.m., both clearly having enjoyed their evening with friends. "How did everything go?" Laura asked, glancing toward the stairs where soft light suggested the boys had probably stayed up reading after their official bedtime. "They were wonderful. We played games, they showed me their collections, and they went to bed without any problems. They're really delightful kids. They can be a handful, but they're good boys," David said with parental pride. Rachel mentioned that you might be interested in regular babysitting work. Sarah's heart jumped with hope. "Yes, definitely. We host dinner parties fairly regularly, maybe once or twice a month. And sometimes we need help with the boys on weekends when we have work events. Would you be interested in being our regular babysitter?" "I would love that," Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice professional despite her excitement. Laura handed her an envelope with $120 instead of the promised $100. "You went above and beyond tonight. The boys were practically asleep when we got home, and you even cleaned up their game room." As Sarah rode the bus back to her neighborhood, she counted the weekend's earnings with growing amazement. The Martinez babysitting job, $60. The catering work, $115. Tonight's job, $120. Her Thursday emergency cleaning, $100. Her Friday paycheck, $180. Total, $575. Added to the $100 she'd already had, she now had $675, exactly enough for rent, due tomorrow. But more than the money, she had something even more valuable. The beginning of a network of families who valued her work and wanted to hire her regularly. For the first time since Emma was born, Sarah could see a path toward financial stability. At home, Emma was fast asleep at Betty's apartment, and Betty reported another successful evening of activities and cooperation. "That child has such a sweet spirit," Betty told Sarah as they transferred sleeping Emma back to their own apartment. "She spent an hour tonight organizing my spice cabinet because she thought it would help me cook better." Sarah looked down at Emma, peaceful in sleep, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude for her daughter's health, for the kindness of neighbors like Betty, for the work opportunities that had materialized just when she needed them most. Monday morning brought a mixture of relief and anticipation. Sarah had rent money, but she also had the larger challenge of sustaining this momentum. She spent Emma's nap time organizing her schedule and contact information for all her new work opportunities. Her phone rang around 2 p.m. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. "Hello, is this Sarah Thompson?" The voice was warm and familiar, though Sarah couldn't immediately place it. "Yes, this is Sarah. This is Reba McEntire. We met at the grocery store last week. I helped you with your groceries?" Sarah nearly dropped the phone. "Oh my goodness, yes. Hi, how did you get my number? I hope you don't mind. I asked the store manager if he could help me get in touch with you. I've been thinking about you and your little girl, and I wanted to see how you were doing." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes at the unexpected kindness. "We're doing much better, actually. Emma recovered from her bronchitis, and I've been able to find some good work opportunities." "That's wonderful to hear. Listen, I have a somewhat unusual request. My management company is looking for someone to help with office organization and administrative tasks. It's part-time, flexible hours, and it pays well. I thought of you because you seemed so responsible and hard-working. Would you be interested in hearing more about it?" Sarah's heart began racing. A job with flexible hours that paid well could be the missing piece of her financial puzzle. Steady work that could supplement her weekend catering and babysitting income. I would definitely be interested in hearing more. Could you possibly come by my office tomorrow afternoon? Say around 2 p.m. It's on Music Row. I can give you the address." After getting the address and confirming the appointment, Sarah hung up the phone in a state of disbelief. Reba McEntire, one of country music's biggest stars, was offering her a job interview because of a chance encounter in a grocery store. The rest of Monday passed in a blur of nervous excitement and careful preparation. Sarah researched Reba's management company online, reviewed her limited resume, and tried to prepare for whatever questions might come up in the interview. Tuesday morning, she dropped Emma off at Betty's apartment with extra gratitude and took the bus toward Music Row, the heart of Nashville's country music industry. The area was filled with recording studios, management offices, and publishing companies housed in converted houses and small office buildings. Reba's management office was in a modest brick building that could have been mistaken for a law firm or accounting office. Sarah announced herself to the receptionist, a friendly woman in her 20s who seemed genuinely excited to meet her. "You must be Sarah. Reba's been looking forward to talking with you." Reba McEntire's office was surprisingly understated. Awards and photos lined the walls, but the overall feel was professional rather than flashy. Reba herself was dressed casually in jeans and a simple blouse, her famous red hair styled simply. "Sarah, thank you so much for coming. Please, sit down." Reba's manner was warm and genuine, putting Sarah at ease immediately. "Thank you for thinking of me. I have to admit, I'm not entirely sure why you'd want to help someone you barely know." Reba smiled. "Sometimes you meet people and you just get a feeling about them. When I saw you at the store, taking care of your daughter even when you were obviously struggling, I saw someone with character and determination. Those are the kinds of qualities I value in the people who work with me." They talked for nearly an hour about Sarah's work experience, her goals, and her situation as a single mother. Reba was interested in practical details: Sarah's availability, her organizational skills, her comfort with office technology. But she also seemed genuinely invested in understanding Sarah as a person. "Here's what I'm thinking," Reba said finally. "We need someone who can handle various administrative tasks, organizing files, managing schedules, handling correspondence, helping with event planning. It's about 20 hours a week, mostly during regular business hours, but with some flexibility for your other commitments. The pay is $18 an hour." Sarah's mental math was immediate. 20 hours at $18 per hour would be $360 per week, or about $1,140 per month. Combined with her weekend catering and babysitting work, she would finally have enough income to cover not just basic expenses, but also savings and occasional extras for Emma. "That sounds perfect," Sarah managed to say, trying to keep her voice steady. "There's one more thing," Reba added with a smile. "We offer health insurance benefits even for part-time employees. I know that's probably important for you and Emma. Health insurance." Sarah had been without it for over a year, relying on the community health clinic for Emma's medical needs, and simply hoping that no major health emergencies would arise. Having real insurance would mean regular checkups for Emma, preventive care, and the peace of mind that came with knowing they could handle medical expenses. "When would you like me to start?" Sarah asked. "How about Monday? That gives you the rest of this week to arrange childcare and get oriented." As Sarah left the office, she felt like she was floating. In the span of 1 week, her entire life had transformed. She went from struggling to afford her daughter's medicine to having stable employment with health benefits. From worrying about eviction to having a clear path toward financial security. The bus ride home took her past the grocery store where she'd met Reba McEntire, and Sarah found herself thinking about the chain of events that had led to this moment. If Emma hadn't gotten sick, they wouldn't have needed expensive medicine. If Sarah's card hadn't been declined at the grocery store, Reba wouldn't have helped them. If Reba hadn't been impressed by Sarah's determination, she wouldn't have offered her a job. Sometimes the worst moments in life created the circumstances that led to the best ones. At home, Emma was playing quietly with Betty, who reported that they'd spent the morning reading books and working on a puzzle. "How did your appointment go, dear?" Betty asked, with the gentle interest of someone who genuinely cared about her neighbors. It went very well. I got the job. That's wonderful. You deserve some good news. That evening, as Sarah made dinner for herself and Emma, she found herself thinking about calling her sister Jessica to share the good news. But she decided to wait until she'd actually started the job and could report that everything was working out as well as it seemed. Instead, she focused on Emma, who was chattering about her day with Betty and her plans for the next day's activities. This was what mattered most, not the job or the money, but the security and opportunities these things would provide for her daughter. "Mama," Emma said, as Sarah was giving her a bath. "Are you happy today?" "I'm very happy today, sweetheart." "Why do you ask?" "You're smiling more than usual." Sarah realized Emma was right. She had been smiling more, feeling lighter, walking with more confidence. The stress that had been her constant companion for months was finally beginning to lift. "Sometimes good things happen when we least expect them," Sarah told Emma as she helped her into pajamas. "And sometimes people are kinder than we think they'll be. Like the nice lady at the store who helped us? Exactly like that." As Sarah tucked Emma into bed, she made a silent promise to pay forward the kindness that had been shown to them. Someday, when she was in a position to help others, she would remember what it felt like to be struggling and how much difference a helping hand could make. Outside their window, Nashville hummed with its usual evening energy. But tonight, the sound felt different to Sarah. Less like chaos and more like possibility. The city that had once felt overwhelming and impersonal was beginning to feel like home. For the first time in months, Sarah fell asleep not worrying about tomorrow's challenges, but excited about tomorrow's opportunities. 6 months later, Sarah Thompson barely recognized her own life. She sat in the break room at Reba McEntire's management office, eating lunch and reviewing her schedule for the afternoon. The job had been everything Reba had promised, and more. Interesting work, flexible hours, good pay, and colleagues who treated her as a valued team member rather than temporary help. More importantly, the steady income had allowed her and Emma to move into a larger apartment in a better neighborhood. They now had 2 bedrooms, reliable heating and air conditioning, and enough space for Emma to have her own play area. Emma was enrolled in a quality preschool program covered by the health insurance Sarah received through work. But perhaps the most significant change was less tangible. Sarah walked through the world with confidence now, no longer constantly calculating the cost of every purchase or worrying about unexpected expenses. She had built an emergency fund, was contributing to a retirement account, and was even considering taking some college courses in business management. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel Martinez. "Sarah, can you babysit this Saturday night? David got surprise tickets to see Carrie Underwood at the Ryman." Sarah's babysitting work had evolved too. She now worked regularly for several families who valued her reliability and Emma's friendship with their children. The extra income wasn't necessary for basic survival anymore, but it allowed for luxuries like Emma's dance classes and weekend trips to places like the Nashville Zoo or the Adventure Science Center. "Sarah?" Reba's voice came from the doorway. "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" "Of course." Sarah followed Reba into her office, wondering if there was a special project or scheduling issue to discuss. "I wanted to talk to you about your future here," Reba began, settling into her chair. "You've been with us for 6 months now, and you've exceeded every expectation we had." Sarah felt a flutter of nerves. "Thank you. I really love working here." "I'm glad to hear that, because I'd like to offer you a promotion. We're creating a new position, executive assistant for special projects, that would involve more responsibility, more hours, and significantly better pay." As Reba outlined the new role, Sarah felt the familiar sensation of her life changing in unexpected ways. The position would involve helping coordinate Reba's charitable activities, managing complex schedules, and serving as a liaison between the management office and various community organizations. The pay would be $28 an hour for 35 hours a week, Reba continued, with full benefits and 3 weeks of paid vacation. "What do you think?" Sarah did quick mental math. The new salary would be nearly $50,000 annually, more money than she'd ever imagined earning. It would mean true financial security for her and Emma, with enough left over for savings and even some luxuries. "I think I'd love to accept," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice professional despite her excitement. "Wonderful. There is one aspect of the job I should mention. Part of your role would involve representing our foundation at community events, charity fundraisers, volunteer activities, that sort of thing. You'd be the public face of our charitable work." The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. 6 months earlier, she had been the person receiving help. Now, she would be the one coordinating help for others. That evening, Sarah picked up Emma from her after-school program at the community center. Emma had thrived in the more structured environment, making friends and participating in activities that had broadened her world considerably. "Mama, guess what we learned about today?" Emma asked as they walked to their car. Another recent addition to Sarah's life that had transformed their daily routines. "What did you learn about?" "Community helpers. We talked about police officers and firefighters and doctors and teachers. Mrs. Jennifer said that people who help other people are the most important people in the world." Sarah smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. "Mrs. Jennifer is very smart. What do you think about that?" "I think I want to be a community helper when I grow up. Maybe I'll help families like we used to need help." Sarah's heart swelled with pride. Despite being only 3 years old when they'd been struggling, Emma had retained some memory of those difficult times and was already thinking about how she could help others. "I think that's a beautiful idea, sweetheart." At home in their comfortable apartment, Emma played in her room while Sarah prepared dinner and thought about the journey that had brought them to this point. The fear and desperation of those difficult months seemed like a lifetime ago, but the lessons learned during that period remained valuable. She had learned that accepting help wasn't a sign of failure, but a normal part of human community. She had discovered that kindness from strangers could be life-changing, and that character was revealed more in difficult times than easy ones. Most importantly, she had learned that circumstances could change quickly and dramatically in both directions. Her phone rang, showing a number she didn't recognize but with a Nashville area code. "Hello, is this Sarah Thompson?" The voice belonged to a young woman who sounded nervous and tired. "Yes, this is Sarah. My name is Ashley Williams. I got your number from the community center. They said you sometimes help families who are going through hard times. I'm a single mother, and I'm having trouble making ends meet. My daughter needs medicine that I can't afford, and I don't know who else to call." Sarah's heart immediately went out to the caller. She recognized the desperation in Ashley's voice, the careful way she was asking for help while trying to maintain her dignity. "Of course I'd like to help. Can you tell me more about your situation?" As Ashley Williams explained her circumstances, lost job, sick child, overdue bills, Sarah was struck by how similar the story was to her own from 6 months earlier. The details were different, but the fundamental challenges were identical. "Ashley, I'd like to meet with you tomorrow if possible. I think there are several ways we might be able to help." After hanging up, Sarah sat quietly for a few minutes, thinking about the phone call and what it represented. The circle was completing itself. She had received help when she needed it most, used that help to build a better life, and now was in a position to help others facing similar challenges. She called Reba's office, knowing that her boss often worked late and wouldn't mind being contacted about something important. "Reba, it's Sarah. I just got a call from someone who needs help, and I wanted to talk to you about using some of our foundation resources." "Tell me about it," Reba replied immediately. Sarah explained Ashley Williams' situation and outlined what she thought they could do: help with medicine costs, connect Ashley with job opportunities, provide temporary assistance with basic expenses while Ashley got back on her feet. "That sounds exactly like what our foundation should be doing," Reba said. "Why don't you handle it as your first official project in your new role?" The next afternoon, Sarah met Ashley Williams at a coffee shop near the community center. Ashley was a woman in her mid-20s, probably about Sarah's age, with the kind of tired eyes that came from chronic stress and worry. Her daughter, Chloe, was 4 years old with asthma that required expensive medications. "I can't believe you're willing to help someone you don't even know," Ashley said, as Sarah explained the various forms of assistance they could provide. "Someone did the same thing for me not very long ago," Sarah replied. "When people help each other, everyone benefits." Over the following weeks, Sarah worked with Ashley to address her immediate needs and develop a longer-term plan for stability. They covered Chloe's medicine costs, helped Ashley find a job interview outfit, provided temporary assistance with rent, and connected her with resources for job training and childcare. But more than the practical help, Sarah offered something equally valuable: the perspective of someone who had been in similar circumstances and had found a way forward. "Some days I feel like I'll never get ahead," Ashley confided during one of their meetings. "I felt exactly the same way," Sarah assured her. "But things can change faster than you think, especially when you're working hard and accepting help when it's offered." 3 months later, Ashley Williams had secured a full-time job as a receptionist at a medical office, qualified for assistance with Chloe's medical expenses, and moved into a better apartment. More importantly, she had regained the confidence and hope that had been eroded by months of financial struggle. "I want to help other families someday," Ashley told Sarah when they met for coffee to celebrate her new job. "When I'm in a position to do it." "I think you will," Sarah replied. "That's how it works. We help each other, and the circle keeps growing." As Sarah drove home that evening, she reflected on the year that had transformed her life so completely. Emma was thriving in preschool, making friends and learning new things every day. Sarah loved her work and felt valued by her colleagues. They lived in a safe, comfortable home and had financial security for the first time in years. But perhaps most satisfying was the opportunity to help other families facing the challenges she remembered so well. In the past 3 months, working through Reba's foundation, Sarah had helped a dozen families with emergency expenses, job searches, and access to community resources. At home, Emma was playing with her collection of books and toys, a far cry from the sparse apartment they'd lived in a year earlier. But Emma's favorite toy was still Mr. Buttons, the one-eyed teddy bear they'd bought at Goodwill during their most difficult period. "Mama," Emma said as Sarah was tucking her into bed, "remember when we used to worry about having enough food?" "I remember, sweetheart. Why are you thinking about that?" "I was thinking that we're really lucky now, but we learned important things when times were hard." Sarah was amazed by her 4-year-old daughter's insight. "What kind of important things?" "We learned that people can be really nice to each other, and that families help each other, and that even when things are scary, they can get better." "Those are very important things to learn," Sarah agreed. "And we learned that it's good to help other people when they need it, like that nice lady helped us at the store." Sarah smiled, thinking about Reba McEntire and the evening exactly 1 year ago when a stranger's kindness had set in motion a chain of events that had changed everything. "Yes, we learned that too." As Emma drifted off to sleep, Sarah stood by her daughter's bedroom window, looking out at Nashville's skyline. The city that had once felt overwhelming and indifferent now felt like home. She had found her place in the community, built a career that fulfilled her, and created the kind of stable life she'd always wanted to provide for Emma. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Sarah, this is Jennifer Walsh. I have a friend who's going through a difficult time, single mother, struggling financially. Could we meet for coffee so I can tell you about her situation? I thought you might have some ideas about how to help." Sarah smiled as she typed back, "Of course, I'd be happy to help." The circle was continuing to grow, encompassing more families, more acts of kindness, more connections between people who understood that community meant taking care of each other. Outside her window, Nashville hummed with its eternal rhythm of dreams and ambition. But for Sarah Thompson, the dream had been realized not through fame or fortune, but through the simple miracle of human kindness and the opportunities that could grow from a single act of compassion. In apartment 3B of their comfortable complex, a young mother fell asleep knowing that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to help others find their way forward, just as someone had once helped her when she needed it most. The cycle of kindness continued, one family at a time, one act of compassion leading to another, creating a web of support that made the whole community stronger. And in Nashville, where dreams were made and sometimes broken, the most beautiful dream of all had come true. The dream of a community where no one had to struggle alone, where strangers helped strangers, and where kindness created possibilities that no one could imagine on their own. Emma slept peacefully, surrounded by the security that came from being loved unconditionally and knowing that tomorrow would bring new adventures and opportunities. She would grow up understanding that people helped each other not because they had to, but because they wanted to, and that the best way to honor help received was to offer help to others. The story that had begun with desperation and fear had become a story about hope, community, and the transformative power of human kindness. And it was still being written, one day at a time, one act of compassion at a time, one family helping another, until the circle included everyone who needed it. In Nashville, city of music and dreams, the sweetest song of all was the quiet harmony of people taking care of each other.